Hey, you guys, welcome back and Happy New Year. Happy 2018. I'm really looking forward to the year ahead, continue making these videos and sharing content with you to help you get more out of your movement practice. Today's video is going to be on flow movements, so we're getting more into the artistic side of things. To me, flow movement is all about self-expression. It's about tapping into your creative potential and cultivating your own personal style in movements. And like any form of art, there's a certain level of vulnerability to it, which can be a little intimidating. This is about almost bearing your soul, and can you share with the world who you are through how you move? Well, it can be tough to figure out where to get started with that. So I'm going to share with you some of the tools that I use to piece together my movement flows. So we'll go through these pieces of movement and then I'll give you some examples of what my flow looks like. I think the coolest thing about this practice that really deserves some attention is that we don't all have to move the same. We don't all have to move to any certain standard. Your movement flow is personal to you. Take what's useful from these tools, polish them, play with them, make them your own, and the more you practice, the more your flow is going to come together. So just keep that in mind, and now let's get into the flow.
All right, the first movement we'll look at is 3-point squat walking. We're going to begin in a deep squat position and just starting to move around in this squat position with the assistance of a hand in contact with the ground. This is going to give you some extra stability and give you the option of just starting to shift your weight different ways and lean on that support arm as you continue to move. Take note of the rhythm and the timing between your steps and your hand placements. Take note of how your hand is contacting the ground. First, softly with the fingertips, and then the palm plants, the arm locks out, and you've got a strong point of support to rely on as you continue to move forward laterally or rotate and change orientation. The next movement I call lateral shuffle crawling. So I start in a deep knee bend position and I reach my hands off to the side, and I'm paying attention again to how my hands are contacting the ground. Fingertips softly accept the ground, the palms plant, the arms lock out and press. This creates lightness, takes weight off the feet, and enables them to perform this small shuffle step in the desired direction. From the baseline of this technique, there are so many cool expressions and variations that you can add in. It's just a moment of balance when you're supported on your hands that enables you to reposition your feet different ways. So you can add in rotational movements, you can change the tempo, keeping the hips very low and moving side to side quickly. There's also the option to float and to take the hips up high while keeping the legs straight or tucked and then returning to the ground very softly. This will feed in nicely to the handstand that we look at later. The side push-up is a pressing variation. It doesn't quite require as much strength as a traditional push-up, but does require a little bit more mobility. From a knee bend position, you can position your hands off to the side and then lower your body down between your hands, almost like you were bringing your ear to the ground. A common mistake that I see with this movement is rotating into a more traditional type of push-up rather than staying in this lateral orientation and lowering the side body to the ground. By keeping this particular orientation, you can hover very low to the ground, and this creates some cool effects to start to play around with within your flow. Extending the opposite leg serves as a sort of counterbalance, and as you go side to side with this movement, it starts to become more fluid, almost like you're falling to the ground and catching yourself very softly. Other variations here with the extended leg lend themselves to being incorporated with squat walking or other crawling patterns really nicely. With so much weight being held in your bent arms, you're free to reposition your feet and your legs to find interesting new transitions. To our squat walking pattern, or as I'll sometimes call it, low gait, we'll look at our spiraling movement next. So these spirals are just a really easy, cool way to change your orientation. You can pivot 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or even 360 degrees, depending on the surface. This is a lot like the 3-point squat walking, but now we're starting to generate a little momentum from the opposite leg to pull us into the rotation. So you can see I'm almost swinging my leg around, and that's driving some of this movement, driving the rotation. We'll stay with this theme of generating some momentum through a swinging leg. This leg sweep action is just another really cool transition. Very quick, very dynamic. It starts in the knee bend position, extend one leg, and the leg is going to swing out in front. And as it crosses the midline, I'm going to have to time it right and plant my hands so I can almost jump over the leg as it completes its revolution. This is kind of tricky to get the timing down, but once you get it, it just kind of makes sense, and there's a lot of built-up momentum, and you can string a few of these together. Next, the low gait spin, the squat spin. This pairs really nicely with crawling. So from a 4-point position, shift weight into the hands and cross the feet. Rock weight back onto the feet and pivot on the balls of the feet to complete the rotation. Just starting off here, things are pretty slow. I want you to be able to see what the position looks like, what the transition looks like, but as you get a sense of it, you can really start to add some speed, make this movement more dynamic. Take note as you execute the spin that you start to align your weight over your feet and you get into that squat position a little bit more. Complete the rotation and then your hands find the ground. Next, we're looking at some different variations of foot-hand crawling. We've got a basic crawl that we see a lot of times in a natural movement practice. Now we're just starting to add a little bit more expression and flair to this movement. So I'm starting out by crawling in this circular pattern, transitioning from standing to crawling to standing. Really getting comfortable with changing levels and doing so very fluidly. Crawling requires a great deal of tension and stability, but here I'm playing around with relaxing my free limb, allowing one arm to just trace the ground and carve in these different shapes and these different movements while I maintain a strong, stable crawling position. And next, we're going to play with some very low crawling movements. So just hovering above the ground, very similar to what we talked about in the side push-up. It doesn't look like much, but it's incredibly challenging to hold that bent arm position to create the strong push into the ground that enables you to reposition your feet and start to move around. As we start adding these shifting movements, either side to side or forward backward, it becomes incredibly important to pay attention to the organization of the shoulder girdle. You really can't get away with the shoulder blades tipped forward or the shoulders internally rotated, as happens oftentimes in yoga or with sloppy push-ups. The shoulder blade retraction and the engagement of the upper back is so important here. Inverted crawling next. This is a movement that is great for traversing down steep hills, but when we're just moving in open space, the changes that I like to make are transitioning from the crawl into a squat, or using very long strides, reaching with the legs, and using that reach and those weight shifts to change position very quickly, very smoothly. Again, it's a situation where it looks really easy, but I definitely appreciate just how much strength and stability it takes at the shoulders, and how much back body strength it takes to really extend that leg and pull yourself forward from the heel. A lot of glutes and a lot of hamstrings, so it might take some time to develop the competence here. Efficiency here in these inverted crawling patterns will be demonstrated by smooth changes of support. So there's never anything clunky, or you're not falling or losing stability at any point, but just making sure that you scale your movements, scale the size of the movements to meet your current ability level. And next we're looking at crawling switches. So these transitions from the foot hand crawl to the inverted crawl, they're huge for me. I'm using these in my practice all the time. So just starting out with some kick throughs here, and taking that into a full transition to inverted crawl. The leg is always passing under the body in this particular switch. So I'm balancing on opposite hand and foot, and my leg is always going to pass underneath my body. Always making sure to push strong into the ground and keep the arms in the lockout position for the most efficient stability. Now I'm going into a different switch, the rolling switch as I usually call it. From face down to face up, I'm going to take my leg and reach across my body. From face up to face down, I'm going to use my arm to lead it. Reaching across my body and reaching until I find that stretch that pulls me right into the roll that brings me through the switch. This spinning transition is kind of fun if the confidence is there. Otherwise, linking both the pass under transition and the rolling transition all into one is just another cool expression. Gives you more options to start to play around and create something fun with your flow. We'll get into something a little bit more advanced now with these arm balances, starting with the elbow lever. So from a kneeling position, I plant my hand off to the side and then I shift my weight on top of my elbow. The elbow is going to be stabbing into my side, just off the midline of my body, right in my midsection. So it can take a while to find the right balance point here, the right way to distribute your weight. So pay attention and you'll see some progressions to start to play around with getting there, starting with the feet on the ground and using 2 hands for additional support. As you find the right positioning of the elbow, you can bring the head to rest on the ground to use that as an additional stability point and start to pick up the legs and see if you can teeter there and find that balance point. These arm balances are just a way to stall in your flow for just a few moments. They fit very nicely with the low gait movements and the crawling movements. A great deal of strength necessary to hold these positions, a lot of tension, and then as you transition back into your movement flow, you fall back into relaxation. So it's just a very cool contrast to bring into your practice. As with all of these movements, they have different names in different circles. I don't have any particular dogma attached to this practice. It's just stuff that I've picked up over the years and started to play around with. And really, I'm just using my balance to guide how I'm approaching the technique here. It's a balance of the weight distribution and a balance of the tension and relaxation. And through the practice, the joints begin to stabilize and you start developing the conditioning to hold these positions with a greater amount of ease. So they may or may not be easy to come by, but practice where you're at as always. It's not about reaching for the next level necessarily, but find stability and find balance where you find it, and practice often, and your practice will grow. At the time of shooting, it had been a while since I practiced any of these arm balances, and I could definitely tell I was a little bit rusty. My body wasn't quite sure how to stabilize, how to hold this, and after a few weeks now, things are coming back. My body's starting to remember. But in this practice, it's a fine line. You'll run into wrist pain, shoulder pain from overuse, and sometimes you just need to step back, and sometimes you just need to rebalance your efforts. So the moral of the story is to just be patient with some of these movements. Let your flow come together as it will. Last but not least, we're looking at the handstand, which has kind of become the symbol of movement over the past few years. I've spent a lot of time training handstands, and if I could go back, maybe I would trade some of that time for developing other qualities and exploring other disciplines, but that's a different story. For our purposes, kind of using the handstand in a more playful way, just starting to flirt with entries and exits and weaving that into our flow. The cool thing here is that we don't need to be so obsessed with creating the perfect line in the handstand or holding it forever, but it's more about just inverting and finding at least a few moments of balance and control on our hands before we softly return to the ground and transition back into our flow movement. You can add cartwheels into your flow, or you can incorporate handstand holds against the wall within your flow practice if you don't quite have a strong handstand yet. And these are all more playful ways to start to develop a higher level of competence with your inversions. And speaking from personal experience, both in my own practice and in coaching, I would really just encourage you to not take it all that seriously. Enjoy it. Enjoy where you're at. Find ways to experiment, explore, practice often, and it'll all come together as it's supposed to. And for the last part of the video today, I just wanted to share some of my flow with you. I want to give you some ideas and show you how some of the tools we presented today can be connected and what it actually looks like in practice. But maybe more important than that even, I just want to take this time to put myself out there and to share with you my flow, my practice. I understand it is a very personal thing. And I want you to see all of it. I want you to see the mistakes. I want you to see the awkwardness. I want you to see that this is just realness. It's just movement. And it's not about being perfect. It's not about meeting any arbitrary standards. It's just about feeling good, moving. It's about creating something that really expresses who you are. I wanted to make this video because I love this practice. And I want other people to have the opportunity to fall in love with this practice without feeling that awkwardness or feeling that worry about, am I doing it right? Or what do I call this? Or what kind of box do I put this in? Or who's going to judge me? It's not about that. And I fall victim to the same kinds of thinking that we all do. I look out on my social media feeds and I see amazing movers from across the globe who just make me look silly. And it's hard not to compare yourself to that. It's hard not to feel less than when you see so much amazing content out there in the world. But I want you to know that it's not about that. It's about you. It's about moving in a way that shares who you are with the world. And I want you to know that that's amazing. By choosing to let your guard down and to be vulnerable and to show the world who you are with authenticity creates a positive impact. It makes the world a better place. It makes you more open. It invites others to be more open. And at the end of the day, this is just a practice. And this practice is a vehicle. It's a vehicle that'll take care of your body. It'll make you strong. It'll make you mobile. But it'll also help you tap into something deeper. Tap into your creativity. Tap into your authentic style. And that's all you. Nobody gets to tell you what that looks like. And I think the landscape of fitness is just so boring when we're all moving the same ways, when we're moving in a way that's devoid of emotion or feeling or expression. So if this is something that feels right for you, then lean in and keep shining. And don't worry about what you look like. Don't worry about what anyone's going to say. Just do you and love your practice. All right, you guys, that's going to bring our practice to a close today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, for falling down the rabbit hole with me as we explore some movements and we explore some of the deeper layers behind the movements. I hope you've taken away some good ideas and some inspiration from this video. If you have any feedback or any questions, you can just drop those in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and keep moving. We'll see you soon.